What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to talk about free hit for Game Week 34. I'm going to go through the draft that I've come up with, but also talk about some other options that you could go for instead if you wanted to, where the risks are for minutes, where the safe picks are, all that good stuff. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the defensive players. So I've got Pickford in goal and Jose Sarr on the bench, and then a back three of Trent, Munoz from Palace, Gabriel from Arsenal, of course, and then the two defenders on the bench are Mykolenko and Branthwaite, so double Everton. But honestly, when you're picking a free hit, you expect at least one start from the 15 players you're picking. So those two defenders aren't going to come on. It's not really a huge concern. I don't think double Everton defence is something that I would want to play this week. In terms of not having any double ups, it really comes down to, like I just said, not wanting double Everton defence, but also wanting two attackers from Liverpool, Palace and Arsenal. I've got double Arsenal defence in my own team where I'm not free hitting, and I'm more than happy with that. This isn't like a massive reaction based on yesterday's results where Palace went and got a clean sheet against Liverpool and Arsenal conceded twice to Villa. I think double Arsenal defence is more than viable on free hit, but I would take the opportunity to go a little bit different and go for two attackers instead. For what it's worth, I don't think you need to be thinking massively outside of the box. Free hitting in 34 is already a differential in itself, but I think where you can get a slight edge, I would try and take it, and I think that's double Arsenal attack rather than defence. With Pickford and Munoz, you could absolutely flip that around and go Henderson and Mykolenko or Henderson and Branthwaite if you wanted to, but I quite like Munoz as a bit more of an attacking defender. His underlying numbers are not too bad and generally plays as a wing-back for Crystal Palace, so I quite like him as a pick. If I didn't want to go for double Palace attack, I would probably double up with Henderson and Munoz rather than going for Pickford, because I actually quite like the fixtures that Palace have got. They did defend all right at times against Liverpool. I mean, Liverpool should have scored, but the general organisation of that Palace team wasn't bad, and they'll find it a little bit easier, I think, at home to Newcastle and West Ham than they would against Liverpool anyway. So the double up is more than fine. I just don't have the slots to go for a different... I don't have the space to go for a Crystal Palace goalkeeper, if I can get my words out correctly, because I've got the double up and attack, which I'll talk about later. On Trent, he's a risk, right? Don't go into Game Week 34 with him in your team expecting a definite 2 starts. There is some risk there. I don't think he was planned to come on as early as he did yesterday. Obviously, Bradley got injured. That forced the substitution to have to be made. And after the Atalanta first leg, Klopp said that Trent was nowhere near starting that game, which kind of made me think maybe he's a little bit far off playing. But at this point, maybe they've got no choice. Now, they could play Robertson, left back, Gomez, right back in one of the matches in the double. I wouldn't, that is something that could definitely happen. So Trent is a risk. I think I would wait and decide based off the minutes in the Atalanta game this Thursday. I'd almost want to see Trent benched again. But a lot of it will depend on the rest of the Liverpool side. If Trent is benched, and there's other clear rotation there to rest players for the league, then that would make me a little bit happier about picking him. If he starts Atalanta, in some ways I'd be a bit more worried about him starting both games in the double. I guess it depends how many minutes he gets, right? If he starts against Atalanta and comes off like 55, 60 minutes, that might be quite good for the double because he's building up fitness and then maybe he'll be able to play twice. And obviously they are chasing the league. If he can get through both games, I'm sure they'll want to play him. I just think, again, we're thinking about what edges you can get over non-free hitters, and Trent is definitely one of those. Like, some people will bring him in this week. I've got the money to do it for my own team, and not everyone is going to be in that position. Not everyone is going to have the transfers. So I do quite like that as a big differential. Like, his ownership will go up this week, but not in a massive way. If you're looking at possible other defenders, the short list of other options, I think, is quite small. For Liverpool, you could definitely go for Van Dijk or Robertson instead. Right now, is Robertson slightly more likely to play twice than Trent? Probably, because he's been back from injury a little bit longer. And he was quite good in the first half against Palace yesterday. But I think if Trent and Robertson both get similar minutes, I'd always back Trent as the one to get more attacking returns. But if you want to play safe and get 2 guaranteed starts, Van Dijk is the only option in that Liverpool team, and he does have some threat from set pieces as well. He's actually on the end of quite a few headers yesterday against Palace, so I don't mind him as a pick, but he is the the safe pick, right? And some people want to go the differential route. That is definitely Trent or Robertson instead of Van Dijk. If you don't want Gabriel for Arsenal, you've got Saliba and Ben White. I just think Gabriel's got the most attacking threat, which is why he's in. But he's also at this point, especially in like top 100k, top 10k, probably the most owned Arsenal defender. So again, if you want to go different, Saliba or White could be an option. We saw actually the benefit of having Ben White yesterday, where he got subbed off early with the clean sheet, and then they conceded afterwards. Now, as long as he always comes off after 60 minutes, I quite like that. But there is the risk that he comes off a little bit earlier as well. So just be a bit careful there. But Saliba and White are both slight differentials over Gabriel. And then you've got Wolves defenders, Aït-Nouri or Kilman. Kilman's not that exciting. I wouldn't include him. I'd rather have an Everton defender or a Palace one, I think. Because remember, yes, Everton have got to play Liverpool, but Wolves have got to play Arsenal, so it's not even that much easier. If Aït-Nouri is confirmed as fully fit, you could potentially risk him. But I'd be cautious, not even in the squad for game week 33. Even if he is back for 34, will he play twice? I think it's a little bit of a risk. If I had Aït-Nouri in my team and Gary O'Neill passed him fit, I'd probably play him. But would I include him on a free hit where you can choose players that are almost guaranteed to start at least once, possibly twice? Probably not. But it's slightly annoying because if he does play both games, I'd definitely rather have him than an Everton and Palace defender. I'm just not sure I'd take the risk. It's not like Wolves are watertight defence either, right? You're getting him in for the attacking return. So I don't think he's essential. I guess we've got to wait and see what Gary O'Neill says. But for me, I quite like the look of that. Trent is a bit of a differential. Gabriel Munoz and Pickford as solid picks. And then you spend the rest of your slots on likes of Liverpool and Arsenal in attack. So for this draft, I've gone for a 3-5-2 instead of a 3-4-3. There is absolutely nothing wrong if you want to go for 3 forwards. There are a few options. But for me, the midfielders are a little bit more exciting for game week 34, which is why I've picked 5 of them. The 2 that would be absolute locks for me if I was free hitting are Salah and Saka. Obviously, this weekend was disappointing for both of them. They both blanked. Salah was definitely not up to his usual high standards. Some people might say that's been the case since he returned to injury, which is probably fair enough. I think he was okay against Brighton. He did have a really good chance against Palace yesterday as well. It was a really good block from Mitchell. Had that gone in, would we be talking a little bit different? Probably. But I appreciate his returns for the fixtures he's had and how good he is have been terrible, really, for FPL. But I just don't think you can go without him in a double game week with Fulham away and Everton away. It would be nice if one of those games at least was at home, but they will get chances, Liverpool, in those games. They've got a league to try and win. And I think Salah is the only attacker that you can almost guarantee will start twice. If he plays against Atalanta and plays 90 minutes, there is even a chance that he will be rested in one of those games, but probably not, right? I think Diaz, Jota, Darwin absolutely could only start once, possibly, in the double. Salah, I think you'd bet on him playing 2 games. Will he play 90 minutes in both? Possibly not. But you don't need me to tell you, right? I just don't think you can go without Salah on free hit. And I've got similar opinions of Saka. He played 90 minutes against Villa, big game against Bayern, but they can't afford to rest him in the league. There's too many big games there. You know, Wolves away, Chelsea at home is not necessarily super easy. They can't just rest Saka like they did against Luton. So I think he's got to be in, right? He's nailed on penalties. All that stuff you've heard a million times before, not just this season, previous seasons as well, probably. So he would be a lock for me. The second Arsenal attacker that I've gone for is Havertz. I don't think there's anything wrong with Odegaard. He did seem to pick up a bit of a knock in yesterday's game and came off around the 75th, 76th minute, something like that. But we will see the Bayern Munich game midweek before we have to lock in any decisions for 34. So if Odegaard is in that team, you know there's no issues as long as he comes through unscathed. I just think there's a good chance Havertz goes back to number 9 and he just gets in the box more. He's getting more shots off in front of goal, whereas Odegaard is usually more from range. Not always, of course. He can get in the box, but it's not his primary role in that Arsenal attack. Whereas I think for Havertz, it more so is, and he has played number 9 a lot. That is the only reason. If you wanted to go Odegaard instead because he's absolutely nailed for minutes when Saka's not on the pitch, he'd be on penalties as well. That's fair enough. But I think I would go for Havertz, who at this point, to be honest, I don't even think is a differential over Odegaard. Havertz has done so well recently. People have put him into their teams. But I think for free hit 34, he is the way I would go. If you wanted to go Odegaard instead, or you wanted to go for double Arsenal defence and just Saka, I think they're all viable moves. And then I've gone for both Eze and Elise because I like the fixtures. West Ham at home and Newcastle at home. Both those teams will give up chances. If we look at West Ham yesterday. Now, obviously, you shouldn't just take stuff from one game only, but they did concede 3.29 expected goals to Fulham. And I think away from home to Palace, like, I'm not sure Palace are going to put up those kind of numbers, but they will get plenty of chances. And the Newcastle defence hasn't exactly been watertight over the last month or so. It's worth saying, to provide a bit of balance, they are on back-to-back clean sheets, and they did play very well against Spurs and were really well organised. But that was at home. I just think away to Palace might be a slightly different story. And also Newcastle will probably not that they'll think that Palace is easy, but they might think that they won't provide so much of a threat in attack as Spurs, and they might be a little bit more open themselves. Possibly. Maybe I'm just clutching at straws there. But either way, I just think on paper, Eze and Elise, it's nice fixtures. They're big differentials as well, and they're absolute ballers. So I would probably have both of them. If you could only pick one, I think Eze is the safest because he's been back from injury for a longer period of time, and he's probably on penalties as well. Elise, that was his first start back from injury yesterday, but he got 68 minutes. I think that's encouraging to possibly start both games in the double. And he's also someone that I don't think a lot of non-free hitters will be able to pick up. Like, lots of us obviously have been planning for 34 for a while, but Elise was injured, so you couldn't go for him as a cheap midfielder. A lot of us went for Sarabia instead, and I think he's a perfectly viable pick. But if we were making that choice this week, I think you'd see most of those Sarabia owners go for Elise instead. So I like that midfield five. Salah, Eze, Elise, Havertz, Saka. In terms of other possible options, you've got Diaz at Liverpool. Nothing wrong with him. I'll talk about why he's not in the team in a second. Arsenal, of course, you could go for Odegaard. I would ignore Trossard, Martinelli, etc. I just don't think the minutes are there. And with Liverpool, like, McAllister is an option, of course, but he might play a bit deeper if Endo is taken out of the team, as we saw yesterday. I just think on a free hit, you can't pick players like McAllister. I think he's more than viable for the last few weeks as a transfer if you were stuck for money. I just couldn't put him on a free hit. He's just not attacking enough for me. For Wolves, you could go for Sarabia, maybe. I don't think that's a very exciting free hit pick, to be honest with you. I would bet against him. Hwang could be interesting, though. He's back now. He got, let me just double check here. He came off the bench, but I think he came off the bench early enough yesterday or over the weekend. Yeah, 31 minutes against Forest. So there's a good chance he will start the next game. The only issue is, we saw with Cunha, he got 2 matches off the bench before he made his start against Forest in Gameweek 33. So it's not a guarantee that Hwang would be in the team against Arsenal for the first fixture. And obviously playing against Arsenal is not easy. They are one of the best defences in the league. I know obviously they conceded twice yesterday, but up until that Bailey goal, they didn't concede a huge amount of big chances. I know that, you know, at that point, I think Tielemans had hit the bar and the post, and obviously Watkins hit the post as well. There were long-range shots, right? Arsenal did keep Villa down to very few chances up until the point they scored, of course, and then they got another one, which wasn't great. But I just think, for Wolves, it's just not a great... I don't know, they're both at home, so they will cause Arsenal problems, and then they've got Bournemouth. I don't hate it, but Sarabia just wouldn't excite me on a free hit, and I'd be too worried about Hwang not starting the first game. Maybe I'm just worrying a bit too much there, but that's my thoughts on it. Everton, maybe McNeil. That's just not very exciting to me. Bournemouth, maybe Kluivert. He's been playing really well, really good against Man United. It's 2 away games, Villa and Wolves. It's all right, but I don't know. Again, I can't imagine putting Kluivert in my team over Elise, Eze, Salah, Havertz, or Saka. But I don't think it's terrible if you wanted to go that route. And then you've got Brereton Diaz, who a lot of people have been talking about recently. I do not hate that pick whatsoever if you want to go for him. His numbers haven't been that bad so far this season in the games he's played. Obviously, looking here, he played 21 game weeks 21 to 23, then was out of the team until 28. So it is a very small sample size. But ultimately, Sheffield United are playing 2 of the worst defences in the league. Burnley at home and Man United away. Now, as bad as Man United have been, do I expect Sheffield United to go away to Old Trafford and dominate the game? Absolutely not. But they will get chances. Like, Man United give up so many shots, and Burnley at home is one of the best fixtures on paper you're going to get. So if you wanted to go for him as a differential over Elise or Eze or even Havertz, right, and go for double Arsenal defence, why not, right? It's a free hit. I think the thing for most people is, you know, 10 out of 11 of your picks are going to be super solid. There's going to be no issues with them. Could people argue for days about going for a slightly different player instead? Of course, right? You could have Diaz in this midfield instead of Havertz. You could have Odegaard instead of Havertz, whatever, right? It's just one player. Most of the players are solid picks. if you want to go for a big differential like Brereton Diaz, go for it, right? You've only got to deal with it for 1 week and then you get your normal team back anyway. I absolutely don't hate it, especially with the fixtures he's got. Would I have him over the 5 players I've picked? Probably not, but it's not my free hit team. And then up front, I've gone for Darwin Núñez and Dominic Solanke. Now, with Solanke, I think a lot of people are going to look at that pick as quite boring and someone that they want to go against, which I completely understand. If we look at his returns since everyone started bringing him in ahead of game week 28, they've not been fantastic, right? He blanked against Burnley in game week 27, blanked against Sheffield United as well. It was a goal in the second game of game week 28 against Luton, and he scored against Everton in game week 30. Then he blanked twice against Palace and Luton, then obviously scored against Man United this weekend. So it's only 3 goals in the last 7 games that he's played, which is not amazing. But I think when you look at all the other forward options, and also the teams that I've blocked, right, by having triple ups already, there's not a huge amount of choice, and he at least guarantees you minutes. Against that Man United game, at one point he was hobbling a little bit or limping, and he still makes it to 90 minutes. And I'm sure he'll play, 80 to 90 minutes in both games against Villa and Wolves away. They're not terrible fixtures either, although, again, like with Liverpool, you'd prefer at least one at home. I don't know, he's got the minutes, he's got the penalties. I know Bournemouth don't get a huge amount of penalties. They were very close against Man United. I just think it's difficult to make a case against him. Like, I can't go for Mateta because I've got 3 Palace. There's no other forwards from Liverpool apart from Darwin. I don't want Jesus from Arsenal. I just think Solanke's like a boring pick, but quite solid for free hit. So he'd probably be in. If you wanted to go slightly different and go for Cunha in that front line instead of Solanke, no issue with that whatsoever. I just think Solanke is the better pick. Like, could Cunha outscore him? Of course he could. But if I was putting my money on it, I would bet on Solanke. And then I've gone for Darwin Núñez. Now, lots of people are going to say he's not going to start both games. I kind of agree with that. I think he'll probably only play once. If he's benched against Atalanta, maybe there's a chance of him getting both games, but even that is not a guarantee. And as a few people pointed out on the stream yesterday, Liverpool's second game against Everton in the double is Wednesday, and then they play 12:30 on Saturday. Klopp absolutely hates that kickoff. So there is probably going to be rotation. Do I think that Darwin starts both games in 34 and the one in 35? No, he'll definitely miss one of those, and it'll probably be one of the games in the double. But are any other Liverpool attackers guaranteed to start twice? Will Diaz, play both games? It's possible, but it's also not a guarantee. It could be that Jota plays through the middle and Darwin's on the left in one game. I personally think Diaz is slightly more likely, but then you've got to play around with the combinations in the team. So, for example, if I was dropping Darwin, I could go straight to Cunha. That's an option, and keep the double Palace defence. But I think I'd want to go to Mateta. So it's something like Darwin and Elise, or Diaz and Mateta. And I just think I prefer the Darwin Elise double up. If you're way more confident on Diaz's minutes, then you should go the other way around. But I think there's a chance that Darwin gets enough to be a good option. Like, you look at yesterday's game, everyone's kind of blaming him for missed chances, and he wasn't great, right? And he can be frustrating, absolutely. But actually, his returns this season have been pretty good. His goals and assists per 90 are not far off Salah in the league. And he wasn't the only one that missed good chances yesterday. Salah and Jota should have both scored as well. But Darwin Núñez is where the focus goes. So I don't think Klopp's going to look at it and just drop him. I'm not sure he was that bad. Maybe that's a bit reactionary. And also, it's going to depend on Jota's fitness as well. Right? He's only he's only come back recently. And if you look at the minutes yesterday, I said this to someone. He played, let me just bring it up here. Yeah, he played 24 minutes. I think if Jota was fully fit, he would have come on earlier. And so that tells me he's maybe not quite up there yet. Obviously, they've got another match against Atalanta on Thursday to build up that fitness. And he probably will get one start in the double. I think the idea that Darwin's just going to get dropped is probably not there. And like I've said, there are a few forward options, but not a massive amount. Like, if I look at the other players that I've put on the list, like Jesus from Arsenal, if you think that Darwin's frustrating, Jesus is just as bad. And I quite like I quite like the Arsenal midfield options in Havertz and Odegaard alongside Saka. Calvert-Lewin and Beto from Everton. Look, if you could guarantee me 290 minutes from Calvert-Lewin, I'd be tempted to punt him. But that is far from a guarantee. And he's even flagged going into tonight's game against Chelsea. Obviously, you'll see that match before you have to make any decisions. Maybe he'll get minutes and be fine. But would I trust Calvert-Lewin to start twice in the double? Probably not. Haaland is an option too. I just couldn't bring myself to free hit Haaland when you've got double game weekers. Like for me, you've got to go for 11 double game week players. You don't literally have to do that before everyone kind of puts it in the comments. But I just think this is your chance to go against Haaland. Brighton away is a really good fixture. I won't sell him, I don't think, for my actual team. But I would go for a double game week here if I was on free hit. I think you've just got to take that opportunity while you've got it. And obviously for Palace, it's Mateta. You could go for Watkins, against Bournemouth at home. Definitely not a bad pick. But I would go for Haaland if it was one single game week or only. And I like Mateta. But like I just said, I don't have the space for... I don't want to go 4 Palace players anyway, probably. But I think Mateta up front or Cunha instead of Darwin. And then go for Diaz or just go for 2 Liverpool players. You don't have to pick 3. I just think on their day, they're so good, especially in attack. I would probably want to go for it. But honestly, if you wanted Cunha up front and you just wanted Salah and Trent or Salah and Van Dijk to be safe, I think you can do that, honestly. Like even for my own team, I won't go into this too much detail because this is obviously a free hit video. But I've even thought myself, if I wanted to sell Son and Haaland and go for double game weekers, I could just play Zabani over Bradley and just only go for 2 Liverpool. It might not be the end of the world, and it's definitely something that you could think about on free hit. If I was free hitting this week and looking at this team, which players would be locked in for me? Salah, Eze, Saka, Solanke for sure, an Arsenal defender at least one, so Gabriel, and that's probably it. But the rest of them are just, you're just picking and choosing your puzzle pieces essentially. Like if you free up a Palace slot, you probably put Henderson in goal instead of Pickford, just stuff like that. But I don't think you can go wrong. Most of the players that I've talked about, including the list of ones that aren't in my team, just pick 11 and they'll be pretty solid, I promise you. If you've enjoyed that, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Leave me a comment below and tell me how much you hate this team and what yours is looking like instead. And if you're listening on podcast, rate 5 stars as well. I'll be back tomorrow for transfer tips, so I'll catch you then.